Hello, 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 hello. I believe we are live. I sure hope so. What's up, everyone? So I wanted to come jump on a live stream tonight. I just recorded an episode of Part of the Problem, a live episode with Robbie the Fire Bernstein in Pottstown, Pennsylvania last night. That'll be out like tomorrow, but there's been a lot of new developments even today, and I just wanted to have something up right away to talk about what's going on with I would say a major financial event that's taken place over the last couple days. And I got my brother Clint Russell here with me. I'm sure most of you watching know Clint, but Clint is the host of the Liberty Lockdown podcast. He's been like a real rising star in the liberty movement over the last couple of years, a phenom, I will say. And the person that I wanted to talk to about this, because he also has extensive experience and I think very unique insight into the kind of financial sector and things of that nature. So what's up, Clint? How are you, dude? Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on, Dave. Yeah, man, this has been a crazy 72 hours now. I've just been reading nonstop and trying to devour everything I can get my hands on to understand what we're up against. And I think I have a pretty good grasp of it. So this will be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, as you might see on the bottom, that we'll have some super chats posted throughout. So we'll try to take some comments and questions and respond to those along the way. So the, it's a very interesting situation because there's so much going on. I mean, so many things happening. And so it's kind of difficult to like kind of apply, okay, here's like sound economic theory, and let's
Right.
try to apply it to what's going on today. And when I say so many things going on, you're talking about we've had the biggest bank failure since the 2008 crash. I believe the second biggest bank failure in like maybe 100 years or something like that. I think the only one that was bigger was Washington Mutual,
Yep.
which was then absorbed by JP Morgan Chase. And so we've had the biggest bank collapse since 2008, like bigger than Lehman Brothers, bigger, a big deal. And then we've had the first, seems to be the first major bank or bailout since 2008, at least in terms of a direct bailout and a different type of bailout. At the same time, in the backdrop, you have this really aggressive move away from Pax Americana, away from the dollar as the reserve currency of the world, away from the petrodollar, this groundbreaking deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, whatever that's going to mean. Of course, everything that's going on with the war in Ukraine. There's just so many factors happening right now. And of course, also in the backdrop is the last 3 years of this COVID regime, the Great Reset, central bank digital currencies, like all of these things happening at once. So even for someone who has like a really good understanding of Misesian economics, it's very difficult to say, okay, how do we apply this here? And so, okay, so I want to try as best we can to kind of go through some of these issues. Let's start with what happened here with SVB.
Okay.
So I want to kind of like I'll ask you to describe this. The best I could say about this is that SVB was a very large, very exclusive bank for Silicon Valley. This is not a bank that you could come in there and be like, hey, we got a new business and we got $100,000. We'd like to open a checking account. That's not, this was like for real players in the game to bank. And essentially, from what I understand, they were overexposed. I think primarily the issue is that they were overexposed to government bonds. As interest rates have gone up, those bonds have been downgraded. This really like destroyed their spreadsheet. Just start with that. What do you think led to SVB collapsing?
Well, I'll give you an interesting slight fix to what you just described there.
Okay.
They could have put $80 billion into T-bills. They did not. They put them into mortgage-backed securities. So this is actually the thing that I discovered on Friday that just absolutely was jaw-dropping. I couldn't even believe it. And then I immediately look it up, and I'm like, what could you have gotten a one-year T-bill for back in 2021? Because this is when this is all breaking down. And it was about 1%. The MBS market at the time and what they got was about 1.58% annualized return. And they go a 10-year duration MBS as opposed to a one-year T-bill. So to chase 58 basis points, about 0.5% added return, they put themselves in a position to go bankrupt. And that's what happened. And I mean, this is negligence of the highest order. And this is where the ESG stuff comes into play, they're just not really focused on risk. And ultimately, as a banker, that is your highest duty. I mean, you have to be focused like a laser on risk all the time, and obviously profitability and looking after your shareholders. But risk is everything as a banker, because if you go insolvent, well, then the whole game is up.
Well, it's another form of profitability and looking after your shareholders. It's
well,
that
exactly.
you don't go belly up, right?
Exactly, because if you have income but you don't take into consideration losses, well, then the income doesn't really matter, right? And that's essentially what happened, is that they put in charge, and well, it gets way uglier too. The CEO was on the San Francisco Fed board as of Friday of this week, Dave. So he got let go. His company goes belly up on Friday, and he gets let go from the San Francisco Fed board on Friday too. I mean, it's incredible.
All right, so listen, did he have a hand in kicking off the global world economic collapse? Possibly, but you got to admit, rough Friday for that guy. Like whatever his weekend plans were, they really got messed up by this. Like that was not Thursday morning. This guy was feeling pretty good about where things were going.
Well,
well, maybe not, but
yeah.
you sent me you sent me which I couldn't even believe was real, but that one of the guys, what was his position? Well, one of the guys who was an exec there was also was he the CFO for Lehman Brothers?
He was the CFO for Lehman Brothers when they went under.
You can't even it's at a certain point, you're like, the people who are writing this simulation script are getting lazy. Like, this can't even be, it's too, for the record, I would like to state that his name was Gentile. So if there's one name I want to hear on a banker,
you're safe,
that's the name I really want to hear. Yeah,
that was funny too, man. That was so funny too. Yeah, anyway. I mean, but it just shows the ancestral nature of the highest level of finance in this country. That no matter how bad you are, even if you presided over one of the biggest economic implosions of all time, you still kick around and end up near the top of it. Yet another big bank that goes bust. It's just, you just fail upward as long as you're politically tied and as long as you say the right things. They don't care. It's really not a meritocratic system, and that's what I oppose most.
Right. I mean, look, I think that's in many ways, just in general, it's the real problem with government and government involvement in every level, is that there's just you have essentially I'd say there's almost three different worlds of economic activity. There's there's the state, there's voluntary association, and there's crime. Right. So there's now criminals, if you're taking someone, you're mugging someone or something like that, well, the person legally has the right to resist. And also there are cops and things like that there might be some form of punishment. In the free market, there's a cleansing mechanism of the profit and loss system, where if you're really not doing well for your customers, you end up going out of business. But with government, they're the one exception where you're there through imposing your will on people, whether they like it or not. And if you fail, you get more funding. If the public schools aren't if the kids aren't literate, then that means they need more money. They need more. And what we've done in the banking industry in general for, since 1913, at least, maybe before then, but really since 2008, has set this precedent that no matter what you do, no matter how stupid and risky you are, there will be this net there to save you. And that moral hazard is just, it's like death. And look, if you did that in any industry, it would be death. I mean, if anyone told me or you, let's say someone came in and said, your podcast will get 1 million views an episode, no matter how good it is.
Right.
I mean, it's no matter whether people like it or not, or anything like that. What would the effect of that be? Even people like me and you who really love what we're doing and take pride in it, I mean, come on, that would just be, there's no way that wouldn't be destructive. And
yeah, so I wouldn't spend all day, every day reading to be able to talk about the most cutting edge stuff, because I'd just be like, well, I don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
And that's essentially what the system is now, is a bunch of uneducated, I mean, they're educated, but in Keynesian academia, as opposed to real world, oh, if you screw up terribly, you're going to go bankrupt and you ought to go to prison. So this is where it gets really ugly. The CEO, CFO, CTO, I believe, 3 of the higher ups, maybe it was actually 4 of them, sold millions of dollars worth of shares of SVB in mid-February. And you have to give some lead time for that. So what that tells me is that they knew that they were defunct as of early February. And then on Monday of this past week, the CEO comes out and says, we're fine. Don't worry about it. Everything's good. As far as I'm concerned, that's criminal fraud. Like you are lying to the public to try and keep your ass afloat. But the reality is like you're exiting simultaneously. If you're not exiting, go ahead and lie. I don't really care at that point.
Right.
But if you're going to exit and profit while everybody else that's a shareholder just sits tight thinking that you're telling them the truth, that should be criminal, in my opinion.
And if you're lying and not exiting, it's also kind of impossible to prove that you're lying. Like it could be like, well, maybe you really believed it. You know what I mean? And but when you're exiting and lying, it's like, oh, you clearly knew. Like you knew you were lying through your teeth, and then we're just pulling out of this. It's just, yeah, it's wild how criminal what all these people are getting away with. So okay, so this happens. I was messaging with you. And I was messaging with like Bob Murphy. I started talking to like all the people I know who I think like really kind of have some interesting insight into all this stuff. And it's Clint. Clint is Satoshi. But so I'm talking about this, and like the thing I was saying that I said to both of you guys, and neither of you really disagreed with me, was I was just like, I don't see, this is as of yesterday, before any FDIC talk, that I go, I just don't see any way that a bank failure this big can be contained. Like I don't see how this isn't a contagion that spreads to like all of the major financial institutions. Of course, as everyone knows, in 2008, Lehman Brothers collapses, and this now sets off this kind of domino effect. And this is, of course, we're in this situation because the entire financial sector is a house of cards, and you can't, a house of cards is like, if you really think about it, it's like there's people who can build a house of cards up really high, much higher than you might think they would be able to build it up, and you could be like, there's no way you can build this house of cards any higher. And then maybe someone who's really good at it can like actually make it go much higher than you think. But what a house of cards cannot sustain is any resistance. Like one little gust of wind and this whole thing is tanking. And I was like, look, I think there's no way that that we're not looking at banker bailouts here, another round of banker bailouts. And you just think about, you think Clint, he'll be yes, absolutely. Treasury Secretary.
Housing and urban development, whatever you need, man.
Transportation seems easy. You don't have to do nothing.
Please don't put me into that trap.
But so, and it seemed to me like, and and you think about like what the significance of this is, that after the last round of banker bailouts, it's not just that like forget even the economics of it, what the cost, the social consequences of banker bailouts are something, because it's just so blatantly corrupt. Like whatever you think about the situation, everyone goes, wait a minute, after everything we've been through, that regular people have been through the last 3 years, these bankers get bailed out. And particularly here, like the whole concept, the whole justification of the FDIC from back in under FDR, when it was created in response to the Great Depression, was that we're not going to let the little guys get wiped out. It used to be like up to $100,000, which was even going pretty big for the 30s. But then I think after 2008, they moved it up to $250,000. But the idea was, but beyond that, you're responsible. Beyond that, we're not like that. And that's not what this is at all. This is blatantly like, it's not.
It's over. The game's over. I mean, they're going to ensure everything from here forward. And this is the reason that I wasn't so convinced that it would be enough of a contagion effect for them to intervene, is that they had 210 billion, give or take. 250 billion is where you start to have the highest level of regulatory oversight. And also Washington Mutual was about 330 billion or so. So it was more significant. Then you add in Lehman and Bear plus WAMU. And then it's like, all right, well, that's definitely enough to set off the dominoes. Is a smaller regional bank, even though it's very, very significant, is that enough to create enough contagion that it takes down the big boys? I didn't think so. But the reason that I was so concerned is more the depositors. the depositors that are working with them are 90% of them had more than 250,000 in their accounts. So these are big businesses. They're not individuals at all. This is a commercial bank. And if you can't make payroll and you can't pay your marketing budget, you basically are like threatening the solvency of God knows how many tech tycoons and tech giants out there. And they've already been slammed by the bear market in the crypto world and Bitcoin for that matter. So like those two factors. And I was like, that's enough right there to send shockwaves through the equity market. And then you have on top of that, the underlying danger that exists within the banking industry because of the bond market, because of the hiking interest rate cycle. Anybody that locked up, 1% or 1.5% MBS is now looking at massive losses on paper, but they don't want to realize them. They don't want to sell when it's at the worst possible. If they can just hold the duration, they get their money back, right? But if they sell now, they have to take a huge loss, and many of them just try to avoid that. And that's exactly what SBV did. They just tried to hold off as long as they could, assuming that the Fed would pivot, that Jerome Powell would blink. He never did. And that is ultimately why they're bankrupt. I'm not saying like they should have hedged. They should have been way more prudent on what they were doing. But this is a direct response to the Fed being extraordinarily aggressive with its interest rate hiking. And one other really important point, the whole reason that they were putting their money into the MBS market is because the regulators say that an MBS is the exact same as cash holdings. So when they are when they're auditing you and they're saying if you need to have X amount of liquidity, well, cash and MBS and T-bills are all viewed as exactly the same thing. That's so stupid. Cash is cash. Any other sort of debt instrument is not cash, and it is not liquid. So the fact that they set that up, they basically, they played by the rules, and the rules were stupid because the rules are set up by criminals. I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I think that there's and I want to get into this kind of because you were making some points. I saw like some of the things you were saying on Twitter, and I want to kind of get into some of like the nuance of what you were pointing out there, because there is this, like, from my perspective, and I just think this is accurate. I look at like Misesian economics, Austrian economics, as just it's correct economics. Like that's just, I agree. It's just economics. Like the way you should view economics is in the same way that, like, I don't know, what the fuck was it called? I can't even remember, but like before there was like germ theory, there were like all these other theories,
terrain theory or whatever.
Yeah. Or there's something with an M, like there were people who thought like diseases came from the clouds, and there were like people who thought like all these things, and they used to, and then they figured out like, oh, it's germs. Right. And it's not like, oh, these are different schools of thought. It's like, no, like this one's right.
So like,
and all the others are wrong. Yeah. Like it doesn't matter if there's clouds, but it does matter if someone's coughing in your face, like that. But in the same sense, like, I don't think there's like a debate between the labor theory of value and the subjective theory of value. I just think one's correct and the other one's wrong. And so I do think that kind of like there is this truth in Austrian economics that essentially we're living through right now, where like, okay, so yes, here's where the problems come in. You have artificially low interest rates for so long, and then the problems are exposed when the interest rates start being raised. That now is when you see where all the malinvestment has been. Okay, but then you were also making the point that I at least I think, if I'm telling this correctly, and please let me know if I'm right or wrong, but I think the essence of the point you were making was that, but this situation's actually a lot more complicated than like, oh, we oppose banker bailouts, which of course we do, but then
and I still do.
Of course. But you go, well, look, if the banks aren't bailed out and you feel this more immediate pain than what you would feel if the banks are bailed out and we kick the can down the road, just know there are other costs that might be associated with that, because we're living in such a crazy moment right now. It's kind of, look, libertarian theory or Austrian economics or any of this stuff, it's not even to say it's incorrect. It's just that there can be a lot of circumstances that add other information along to that. So if you think, for example, I don't know, it's almost like if you were opposed to slavery, you're an abolitionist. You think slavery is immoral. Okay, we all agree with that position. But also, if there was like some like I don't know, group of, like some group of savages who were running in, who hated this slave owner, and they wanted to murder all his slaves to fuck him over, but you knew that slave owner had a whole bunch of guns, and he was gonna like, fight and die to protect his property or whatever. And you went, well, I want you to free us right now. You'd be like, well, if he just releases you right now, you might get slaughtered by this group that's outside the perimeters.
That's a good way to put it, actually.
Now, none of that disproves, like, none of that goes, and see, that's why you should be for slavery and not against. It's like, no, we're still against slavery. The point is just that, like, a huge, like, calamity in the financial markets right now might actually usher in something very, very awful. Now, that's not, it's not like, oh, so therefore I support slavery, or therefore I support banker bailouts, but it is like, let's really think about everything that's going on right here. Exactly. And there's a lot of different possibilities of very, very bad outcomes.
No, well, I mean, well said, but let me add, because I have gotten just absolutely blasted for just describing what's transpiring and like warning people that there will be fallout whichever way the Fed plays it. And on top of that, they're not reading Liberty Twitter. They don't care what we say right now. I'm just trying to inform my audience, which is now fairly significant. Hey, if they do this, you're going to want to be looking at that. And if they do that, you're going to want to be looking at this. That's all I was trying to accomplish. And everyone's like, oh my God, you support bailouts. Of course I don't support bailouts. So
to be fair, you were a little snippy back with some of those people. I saw you. They were like, are you supporting bailouts? And you're like, you're dead to me.
No, I was just like, unfollow. And I hope they do. You know how it is. Like, once you get to a certain following, you just have so many people saying the same thing over and over again, and you're like, I'm done. I don't care anymore.
Yes.
I'm done.
I hope those people refollow and kind of get what you were trying to say. But yes, but anyway, all right.
Yeah, it's up to them.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
All right. So here's all of the variables that people need to consider. If you allow this bank to go bust and you do not insure the depositors, and there is similar banks of this caliber, and perhaps some that are even more sizable, that are also facing similar circumstances, and the libertarians are up there going, and the Fed, no bailouts, and they let them fail too. You enter a depression. That's what happens. You would enter a depression. Okay, now once you're in a depression, do you think the politicians are going to listen to us then and say, okay, now we're going to sound money. Now we're going to, allow a free market, any sort of free currency system or competing currencies? No, they're not. They're not going to do that. They're going to respond with a new deal. They're going to respond with a central bank digital currency. They're going to hit you with every status solution, because the people that don't understand what we do are going to respond by saying, government, do something. And what they do is going to be completely counter to what we want to see in the world. So while I'm not advocating for bailouts, I am saying, if you allow a cascading default that becomes global in nature, not only do you face the potential of a new deal, but you also face the potential of World War III, because oftentimes that's what empires do when they enter economic turmoil. Oh, let me also add, we're on the cusp of World War III with both Russia and China right now. Is that something that we should consider before we say no bailouts? I think it's something we should consider. That's all I'm saying. Right. And people are like, you can't say that. Just say end the Fed right now, Clint. I'm like, look, I'm telling people there are other things here. And I just hope people understand that, like, this isn't simple. This isn't simple at all. And if you want me to virtue signal to you, I'm not your guy. I'm just not going to do that.
Right. No, it is like I think that's exactly the point. It's not, it's just saying that even if you're like, even by starting with what I said, that like, okay, I think Austrian economics is just economics. It's like the right economics, in the same sense that like germ theory is just science, like but you also can recognize that like there are extenuating circumstances, and this does seem like one of them. Now, I don't support banker bailouts, and in fact, I think this is, all things considered, probably worse than the alternative, that we're having another bailout. And I don't even know that this itself is going to prevent the need for more bailouts, because one of the things that's so crazy about this system is that when you talk about this being like a wider contagion, like whether it affects other major institutions in the financial sector, the whole thing is propped up off confidence, and as soon as confidence takes a hit, the whole thing can take a hit. That's all it takes, right? Like
Yep.
It's a Wonderful Life or whatever the movie is, like, right? If people want to pull their money out, the whole thing collapses. Like, so that's almost what we're counting on. And we're going to find out tomorrow, and then I guess the next couple days, what exactly this means. But there is like a point to be made that, so I was when I was had like kind of an informal debate with Curtis Yarvin on Michael Malice's show, which ended up being not as I think good as it could have been on both of our ends, in my opinion. But whatever. But
Dave,
he made a point.
polls stand up as long as you have enough sand on each side of them. That's
Yeah,
all I took away
there
from
you
that.
go.
It was
Right,
it was
whatever.
20 minutes of a metaphor that I didn't even want to hear for the first 30
Yes,
seconds.
yes, right. It's a lot of that. But I could have done a better job, I think, too. But whatever. But so one of the things he said that I did disagree with and push back on a bit. But so he basically kind of made this argument that almost, and I think I'm accurately representing this, that almost like, look, in a sense, Misesian economics is right, but in the situation we're in, to actually do what you're advocating would result in so much disaster. Like to actually let all the banks fail and let everyone do this would result in so much disaster that it would be cannibals in the street and all of this.
It'd be really bad.
At this point, we can't advocate for that. Now, I disagree with that. I think that almost like libertarianism is the correct solution here, and in a sense, like, and again, a lot of this is somewhat in the theoretical realm, but I mean, if we applied this theory to the real world, I think that look, the obviously, if we just allowed, say, market interest rates to take over, which, by the way, market interest rates would be much higher than even these interest rates are, so much higher. Yeah. There's no question we would liquidate all of the debt throughout the entire banking sector, the government sector, all of this. Now, I go, look, the truth is that, and I think it was Robert Higgs who made this point. I might be getting that wrong, but I think it was Robert Higgs who made the point that he goes, look, you're not going to have like a depression like the 1930s today. Because think about just the technology that we have and the innovation that we have, just the human knowledge that we have, what that every engineer has, the medical technology that we have. These things don't go away. Like even just like the knowledge of like modern farming compared to what it was in the 30s. It's you know, like short of H bombs being dropped on every major city.
Right.
You're not going to like be reverted to that. So if you had this system, like if you allowed all of this to happen, and then you can think about which we brought up in the debate, you can think about the forgotten crash as it's called in 1921. Where that you recover very quickly. It really sucks right now, but you get over it. If you think about like Hong Kong or South Korea or these areas, like once you have all this knowledge that exists in the world, you can go from mutt huts to skyscrapers in a few years. Like we could get past all of this, is what I believe. But I think the point that you're making is that you're like, okay, so that's like, even if that's true theoretically, that only works in reality if we adopt libertarian principles.
Exactly.
Like, yes, if all these banks failed and we just allowed the free market to cleanse this process, I think it would work out very well. But you also must ask yourself, how likely is that? How likely
it's not
is it?
likely.
Like, and it's so unlikely. I mean, it's not like that. It's not likely. It's really like such.
It's not going to happen.
Fucking understand. Like, right? There's like such a small chance that you go like, it is possible that like almost like even kicking the can down the road while we're against that, maybe that is the best, you know what I mean, like of the worst options. Now, by the way, I'm going to oppose all of this, and I think we should. I think our role,
and I do,
like you said, they're not listening to libertarians on Twitter, but I think our role is to point out how this was all created by the whole insane Federal Reserve fiat currency fractional reserve banking, system, and why the best thing moving forward is this, and this, all the libertarian things. But at the same time, it is a little bit like, I get your point that it's like it's kind of short-sighted and simplistic for libertarians to act like, oh, if we just allowed everything to crash, then that would be the move. Like as if they all crashed, we would end the Fed or something. But that's not what's going to happen.
Exactly right, Dave. And the reaction would probably be UBI and CBDC, like universal basic income with a central bank digital currency. Like that is more probable. But see, here's the issue. On the inverse of that, like I agree with generally the rip the Band-Aid off right away mentality. But the reality is that on the inverse of this, if you go the bailout route, you also now have risk turned back on, where the animal spirits, as the idiots say, start to kick back up, and you start to have more credit creation and more borrowing and more investing into ESG and a bunch of garbage. And ultimately you end up with the potential for a hyperinflation, because this is the other variable that I
Right.
also included in my mini rants to everybody, is that China was the country that brokered that deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That is a big, big deal. Saudi Arabia, the whole underpinning of the US dollar, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that the Saudis agreed in the 1970s to sell their oil in dollars. Otherwise, why is this the reserve currency of the world? So if that is ending, which it might be, well, what the hell does that pretend for us? Like, what does that mean moving forward? And in my opinion, that is the reason that Jerome Powell has been so steadfast in his interest rate hiking, is because they see this. They know what's happening. They know that the unipolar world order is in shambles, or it's at least under serious threat.
Yeah.
And you have China that is now creating alliances. Do you think that the U.S. government wants Iran to be friendly with Saudi Arabia? Of course not. Like the whole reason that this is being done is because China wants to undermine the petrodollar system. That's my read of it. So if you don't rip the Band-Aid off now, we may be facing hyperinflation. So like, I'm not saying that this is a good route either. I was just trying to
pointing
inform
out
people.
that there's
either way, it's terrible.
Yeah, just so you know, we're stuck between some bad choices right now.
Yes.
We're stuck between some very bad choices. And yeah, I think it should, like, for people to understand the significance of everything that's going on. And obviously, over the last 3 years, there's been a lot of significant things that are happening. But we've been living under, so I'd say since 1946 or whatever, you could say that's really when, like, the American empire was the dominant force.
Mm-hmm.
There was no more British Empire, and the American Empire was the dominant force. There was, of course, the Soviet Union also, which had a large sphere of influence, even though we had a much larger one.
Right.
Since 1991, it's been the American Empire, the only real empire in the world. There have been people who have given the middle finger to the empire over them,
they don't exist anymore.
Well, look, I mean, Fidel Castro, he's dead, but he did it and survived with a little island in Cuba, and then, whatever, didn't, okay. North Korea has done it and survived with a little chunk
of doing
North
great.
Korea. Yeah, right, exactly. And there have been other more serious countries, basically
Assad.
everyone who says that everyone who the U.S. media machine says is the enemy, pretty much all of them,
exactly.
Saddam Hussein,
exactly
Muammar Gaddafi, the Iranians, the Russians, the Chinese. Now there's some of them, are more serious than others, but okay, fine. And there was, like you said, Assad. Okay, this is, by the way, the essence to me. I was just talking about this on my last podcast that came out, that this is the essence of why Putin became this evil bad guy, is that he gave the middle finger to the U.S. empire when he intervened in Syria.
Yep.
If you remember, George W. Bush, even though they were being very aggressive and very provocative toward Russia, he was saying publicly, I looked in Putin's eyes and he's a good guy and all this. Hillary Clinton, when Obama came in, said we are having a great reset, all this stuff. It wasn't like until Russia actually intervened in Syria and actually cost the U.S. a victory. Like, we were in the midst of a regime change, and he said, I'm coming in on the other side, and he won. That's a no-no. You're not allowed to
do that.
Yeah, after that, it was on with Russia. And
I think your read there is perfect.
All of that. Now, this level of middle finger to the United States of America, where you're talking about Saudi Arabia, our puppet, government. I mean, the government that we've been propping up since the 70s
Mm-hmm.
to really, to go so against the US's wishes and Israel's wishes and say, we're going to make a deal with Iran right now to have Russia and China uniting. This is a different ball game than I think anything we've seen. I think it is finally like the US really overstepped what they were capable of doing. And whew, it is kind of like an all bets are off situation right now.
And this is the point that I've made on my show. I mean, what we've seen historically, like we always talk about how NATO has expanded, but it's based off of coercion, right? Or sometimes it's based off of CIA color revolutions too. But really, what it is
I've been told it's voluntary.
Yes, I know.
I've been told.
But really, what it is it's countries that are in between two big dogs choosing the biggest dog. And what you're seeing now is countries that used to say, of course, I'm going to side with the Americans, are now saying China and Russia might be the biggest dog on the block. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's what Saudi Arabia is saying with that move. I mean, that's really what they're saying. If you have a divide that consists of Iran, Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, a litany of other countries, I mean, that's a force that you really probably can't defeat, particularly given all the nuclear warheads that they have. And I think that's what we're up against. I think that's what we're facing. And I think that's also why we've been on a war footing with both China and Russia, is because we've been trying to pressure them and dissuade them from going down this path. But it's too late. We've now accused Russia or Putin of picking our president. We've lied through our teeth about him for years. We've incentivized or basically, lit the fire in Ukraine with our intervention there for years and years. And now it's just no turning back time. So when I'm talking about this finance stuff, I'm like, look, and this is what's really fascinating. I feel like I'm in a very unique position to speak on this matter because I have a finance background, and now I've dedicated the last 3 years of my life to reading and studying geopolitics. Like that is a skill set that very few people have. So when I'm talking about this stuff, I'm like, this is right in my wheelhouse. I am understanding this from so many angles that I like 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been even close to realizing all of the reasons that this is not a simple thing to digest. And I was just trying to express that to people. And I hope that this episode conveys it in a better way, because it's very important. It's very important that people understand, whatever the Fed does. And now we know that they're only bailing out depositors. They're not going to bail out the equity or the shareholders. I think that's kind of a middle ground that might be tenable in the intermediate. And let's pray that doesn't bring on inflation. We'll see.
Well, to be fair, we don't even know that. We know that that's what they've said as of now.
Sure.
Like we don't know what it is they're going to do, because what we're going to see is the markets open up tomorrow morning. We're going to see like where everything goes, and then that might really change everything. If you remember, in 2008, there was a lot of different kind of like levels of like, well, we're just going to do this. Oh, actually, we're going to do this, and actually, we're going to take care of everybody. Right. I think my perspective on it is that I don't think that I think there is a very small chance that the US Treasury and the Federal Reserve would allow any of the big banks to actually fail. I just don't think they're going to do that, no matter what you think, whether you think that's for the best or not. All things considered, I still think it probably would be for the best. I think that there's, I would oppose bailouts and
so would I.
All of that stuff. And
I think it's important that people just start to describe the big five or whatever it is of banks, or big four. They're nationalized. Those, if you are able to, make profit, but never realize a loss and get bailed out no matter what, and you can deposit your funds with them knowing that it's just the same as having your money in T-bills with the federal government. What's the difference? I mean, it's very...
In a sense, you could kind of have a debate between whether, here, if there's a few of the commies who listen to the show, if you're in there, here, let me throw you a bone. I don't even know if it's exactly that the banks are nationalized or the government is bankified. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good distinction.
That might be more of like, really, I don't know who took over who here, but they're all kind of in this same club together. So but I don't think they're going to let that happen. And I think I've always kind of felt like, and I might be wrong about this, but I've always felt that this move toward raising interest rates was going to end with 0% interest rates again. I always felt like it would get it to some point where they really start piercing the bubble and they have to go, we're going right back down, right back to quantitative easing, because we have to try to reinflate this thing, because there's no way, there's obviously a limit that they just can't get to. It's when you're in, I mean, they say like the 30 trillion plus debt of the federal government, but that's really nothing.
No,
I mean, we're talking about
unfunded liabilities, baby.
Unfunded liabilities in Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. But then you're talking about at every state level, the unfunded liabilities in their state pensions. And then you're talking about all the corporate debt. And then you're talking about all the individual debt. And then the number is like in the hundreds of trillions of dollars. And there's a certain point where you want to prick this bubble, man. Whew. It's going to be something, and I don't think they'll allow that, because the end of that is is not going to be good for their their interests. So I think that's where we ultimately would go if we needed to. Then the question becomes like, is this the last round of that they could possibly do? Because I don't think, especially with all of the concerns over price inflation over the last few years, I think you do something like that, and now it's not just like 2008.
No,
it's not just that again. It's like, oh, it's a whole different level of like, oh, there's real pain on that end too that you can't kind of cover up. So I do think it's true that we're in a position where we're choosing between a lot of negative outcomes and what we want. And I do think it's important that people just be aware of that. Go in knowing that that's what's up.
And I think that the likely solution when we hit that period will be central bank digital currency. And if you have listened to my show for the past 3 years, like that is the biggest concern I have, because once we have that, we are enslaved in perpetuity. It's just over. There's no exiting that. And what I would like to do is reach people while the sun is still shining, and inform them of the risks that exist within central bank digital currency, so that when the depression or the hyperinflation hits, you don't have people clamoring for it, because the government is going to be able to package this in such an easy fashion. They're going to say, oh, you can't eat. Here's your universal basic income. Oh, also, it comes in the form of a central bank digital currency. And the starving and the poor are going to jump for it. And I just don't know if we can, have America if that's what happens. So it's a really bad position to be in. It's all predicated off of central banking. And none of this has to be how it is. And obviously I lay the blame where it should be. It's the political class and the banking elite. But it just doesn't change the reality. It doesn't change the reality of like what this means to us moving forward. And I'm out of solutions other than like 50-50 hedge, cash if it goes deflation, Bitcoin if it doesn't. Like I'll shout out Guy Swan for that one, because I know he'll appreciate it. And I think that like those are the two plays. I've been saying this for 3 years, but I genuinely believe I've been right. Like we are on the cusp of either just total depression or hyperinflation. Like those are the two options, and it's just a matter of time before we figure out which one the powers that be opt for, because they will ultimately decide it.
Yeah, and I will say I agree with that. I still lean toward hyperinflation.
I do too.
As being the end of this, because I think that my guess is that they can't bite the bullet and just accept that. However, what throws it, this is what I've said for years now. I mean, this is well over a decade when people have had this inflation deflation argument. I've always agreed with Peter Schiff versus like kind of his opponents, where I go, look, at the end of the day, they're gonna print the money. They're not gonna not do it. They will do that before they will let that fail. By the way, we have a bunch of super chats. We're gonna start going through those in a second here. But that's always how I've felt. However, I will say that the Great Reset, the central bank digital currency, like ESGs and all this stuff has thrown another little wrench in the mix, where I go, maybe they've also this whole time been working on a plan. Maybe all of this woke indoctrination, even in the university, is like maybe all the climate indoctrination, maybe all of this stuff, the COVID indoctrination, maybe this is part of something bigger. That
lockdowns,
right, that like you're like, oh, maybe they're actually working on a plan that they could crash the thing and they have the next thing to institute, in which case deflation might be the answer, in which case a lot of libertarians, even though completely correct on economic theory, have missed certain variables that we actually might be looking at deflation. So I've gone from being like 80-20 on the inflation side to being much closer to 50-50
Well, and
on this.
the reason that most nations that enter this kind of like no way out scenario, the reason that they usually choose inflation is because the wealthy are the ones that run the government, and the wealthy have hard assets that benefit from the inflation. So they usually choose that path, but that doesn't mean that they will for sure. And if they just play it wrong, if they continue with their interest rate hiking because they're trying to maintain the purchasing power of the dollar on a global scale, well, they can tip this thing over. The Fed never gets it right. They always over-adjust one way or the other. Well, what if they over-adjust to the top side and we see 08, 09? But then there's so much uncertainty and there's so much lack of trust. No one trusts the institutions at this point because they locked us in our fucking houses for 3 years or 2 years. It's like, well, maybe they can't build it back, like maybe they can't build back better. And these are variables that, like, even though they have their plans, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to go that direction. I think that they're going to choose one, and we'll see. But it's like, man, this is just it's such an inflection point in, like, not just my life, but like human history, really, because you're talking about the like undisputed global hegemon with nuclear weapons. That has never been the case in any other empire collapse. And like, we need to consider what that means for humanity. And as someone who's like, even though I am a finance guy, at the end of the day, like, my biggest concern is World War III. Like, that's really what I'm worried about most. So like, if I have to, sacrifice my principles and allow the Fed to bail out banks, even though I'm not making that decision, like, they don't give a shit what I think. Right. But if it ultimately means that we avoid nuclear holocaust or just conventional World War III, as if that's a possibility, which I don't think it is, well, fine. Like, I would prefer to just have some sort of statism as opposed to statism of the most horrific order.
Right. No, I get what you're saying for sure.
I know it's dark, but I'm just being honest.
No, well, it is like, look, I mean, you try to, like, you want to not be an alarmist. And I've fallen victim to this before myself, where I've been very alarmist over the last, decade, for at least, probably more than that, where I've been like, look, this thing's about to collapse. And I was like, okay, I was wrong. It wasn't about to collapse. But then at the same time, and this is maybe in some ways, I know there's some a lot of people have kind of been grappling with this within the libertarian world, where I think for a lot of us, we've had this situation, and maybe even some people who have left the libertarian world, where it's been like, when you were talking, say, in 2007, 2008, 2009, about how this whole system is destined to collapse and we're living under an authoritarian regime and this is horrible and blah, and you talk about these ideas and you really believe it. But at the same time, it's still kind of a concept in your mind.
Yeah.
And over the last 3 years, it's been like, whoa,
exactly.
This is real. Yeah. This isn't just like something we're talking about. You're like, oh, this is really like something that is actually happening in front of all of us. And we realize no matter what, we're living through a major historical event right now. Yeah. And so what exactly this is going to mean is not completely clear, but it is something, it is important to kind of think about these things. And really, as you said, the most important thing in the very short term is doing whatever you can to protect yourself. I don't actually know that there's that much you can do right now to protect yourself for what's happening this week. But it is important to think about this and like what you've been doing over the last few years and what is the best course of action here. I think your kind of 50-50 hedge is not a bad recommendation.
Yeah. And I think that on top of that, I just want to encourage people, if you're ever going to speak out, now's the time. You need to not be cowardly in your place of work. You need to actually inform people that World War III is not a fucking game. It's not a joke. And like, if that makes people at your work go, oh, this guy seems like a Trumper or whatever, who gives a shit, man? Like, we're talking about trying to prevent nuclear holocaust. Can we just like have some sort of courage in this moment and also pushing back against the woke stuff? And to your point about like how much more dire this is. Yes, you're right. 08, 09, there was no lockdown. Lockdowns was a like a fucking dystopic novel that we
Right.
could have never imagined. Now it's happened. We exist under a government that will absolutely enslave you and your children and force your child to wear a mask for years for no fucking reason. Well, theoretically, I mean, it probably helps kids, just letting YouTube know.
Yeah.
So,
wait, I think we're allowed to talk about this bank failure, Clint, but please don't bring my channel the way of yours.
I'm just saying, man, like that, like it's not just theoretical. It's just not theoretical anymore. And I think that that's the reason that I approach this topic with such a level of seriousness. And I know it's off-putting for people because they just want to, like, kind of keep it still in the theoretical, where it's like, we have the right answers. We're libertarians. We know what's up. And I'm like, yeah, we do have the right answers, but they're not listening to us. So I have to try and look out for you guys. I have to tell you what's the best play. How do you keep your family safe during this period? Like, that to me matters more than being the most principled guy in our team or whatever.
Yeah, and it's not even like, again, I don't think it's a matter of sacrificing any of your principles. I think
don't
it's
either.
like I said, it's if you're talking about like whatever, the example I used before, there's a militia moving in and you're like, free all the slaves right now, or even something like, there's like, imagine you had like kind of like martial law, and in a society, and you're like, I'm against this because it's wrong. And then there's an invading army coming in, and those troops will fight against the invading army. To right now be like, all right, all of you stand down, just may not be the best move in that moment. And that doesn't prove that you're against, like, oh, that's why you've sacrificed your principles of being against slavery or against martial law. It's just going like, hey, I recognize that this is a really crazy situation that we're in right now.
Right.
Okay. In 1 second, we're gonna get to some chats. So just if you guys are chatting, don't worry, we are about to get to you. I know there's a lot of people in the audience right now who
Almost
are chatting
2,000.
and want to hear. Whoo, there you go. And this will be up, so a lot more people will see this in the next few hours and tomorrow or whatever. And then into the afternoon tomorrow, where all of this might be irrelevant because something else huge has happened. What do you think, if you had to guess, Clint, what do you think is going to happen this week?
Well, this is the fascinating thing. A couple hours ago, news came down that Signature Bank, which is out of New York, was also seized by the feds. And it's like the second biggest bank, I think, beneath Silvergate when it came to the crypto world. I know people get mad when I say crypto world. That's what it is, because they're not just trading in Bitcoin, folks. So I'm just being honest. It's lots of different cryptocurrencies. So the fact that they've been seized just tells me that there is tremendous fragility in this. I mean, not just the banking sector, but the broader economy. It's very, very fragile. So is the assurance of depositors, but not the equities or not the shareholders, is that enough to stop a contagion? Like, if there's more banks that are sitting on similarly unhedged either T-bill or MBS positions that are now more or less illiquid, but they just haven't been caught by regulators yet, we might find out this week. Like that's what contagion means, really, is like you have a bunch of guys that are in very precarious positions, but no one's really paying attention because the sun is shining and everyone's happy and money's flying. And then all of a sudden you go, oh shit. Like people describe it as, well, the water goes out and then you see who's been swimming naked. Like that's how they describe it. And I think we're going to find out this week that there's probably other big players out there that are swimming naked. Because they have insured the depositors. I think that will stop the bank runs. I think that'll stop the major contagion factor that would have been, truly cataclysmic. So I guess I'm more optimistic. But just don't rest on your laurels. Like this could still go a really ugly direction potentially.
Well, I almost think there's no question that it's going to. I think that this is going in an ugly direction one way or the other. I think that
just timeline.
Like if you think about, I really believe, as I've said before on the show for years now, that I think the banker bailouts of 2008, and even I know people can make the arguments that they're like, well, TARP was all paid back, or JP Morgan Chase didn't even want the money and they made them take the money and they paid it back with interest. And of course, all libertarians know, well, yeah, but look at the Federal Reserve, 15 trillion they extended. And it's like, okay, was it really paid back with interest? And then if you actually look at the zero interest rates and the high government spending, basically there was this humongous bailout of the politically connected and the elite, and then everyone else suffered for it. But if you just look at what the social cost of that was and what the political cost of that was, is that the trust in institutions evaporated after that. It was just it's just too obvious to even trick your average working class Joe six-pack. They're just like, wait a minute, you still keep your private jet? Like you get bailed out.
But I'm not supposed to eat steak.
I got foreclosed on, and you
Right.
get bailed out. Like, come on, you just can't pull the wool over people's eyes that bad. And I think that this will lead to a drastic increase, even from where we are, in the distrust of institutions. And I gotta say, in some ways, I think that would be really maybe the best case scenario, is just that people really wake up to all this shit, because there is only so much you can get away with if you can't propagandize the people into it. So that might be great. But at the same time, I'm still saying I oppose all the bailouts and all of that stuff. I think that it's horrific, and that this was we know who caused all of this, and that's what our focus should be on, is to wake as many people up and galvanize as many people, to be aware of the fact that these people, this is what caused this whole mess that did not have to be this way. It's the Federal Reserve. It's the fractional reserve banking whole apparatus. It's the Treasury Department. It's the corrupt politicians and the corrupt crony capitalists. The same as it's always been. So that I think is important for people to know.
I completely agree. I think that the messaging ought to be to shift the Overton window to get more people in our camp, that when you see the next crisis, you might actually be able to apply political pressure to get the Federal Reserve or the Treasury to do the right thing. We don't have those numbers. Unless a million people are going to get in the streets tomorrow and say no bailouts for Silicon Valley Bank, like, it's not going to happen. Okay. So they're going to do whatever the hell they want until we have enough numbers that can actually force their hand. And if that doesn't happen, well, then we're just going to have to wait until either the hyperinflation or the deflationary bust comes. And then we have to build back better from there. And it's like, I'm trying to, stay optimistic and think that we can actually get enough people woken up. But if COVID didn't do it, I don't know, it's wild.
Yeah. Well, the truth is we don't know yet. The truth about COVID has just started to really be exposed.
That's true.
We don't know exactly how woken up people are, so like it's you want to think, yeah, it is possible. It is possible.
I think we're getting close to half of people that are woken up, but like they're still believing like Trump or Biden is like the answer to.
But in the same, but also because those are the options that they have,
right?
And like it's if you think about the fact that, like, say, like after Pearl Harbor, then fast forward to even after 9/11, how much they could propagandize the entire population, or at least huge 90% of the population, to just believe the official narrative and not know any of the backstory. And then you fast forward to, like, say, COVID, and they weren't really able to do anything like that. And now with all of this after COVID, it's like that we might be hitting that might be the ultimate white pill here.
Yeah,
is that we're hitting a breaking point where now the next one, they're just not going to be able to do that. Also, think about the polls in the support for the Ukraine war over the last few months, how great that information's been. So we might be hitting, we might be hitting a turning point here where actually the establishment has really just lost their own people in America so badly that they can't, propagandize us any further. We will see where all of this goes. Okay, let's take some of the super chats and respond to if there's any questions that people in the audience want to ask. What do we got? Okay, my tweet to Jason Kalkanis: sleep easy knowing you were bailed out by regular Americans. You helped perpetuate a system based on socialized losses, moral hazard, unaccountability. He responded, actually, it's just loans. Yellen is clear that the taxpayers would not pay for this. Right. Okay, that's pretty incredible that he would actually say that. Okay. Well, yeah, no, the taxpayers won't be on the hook at all. It's just loans.
Yeah,
but it's loans that they didn't agree to make, that they were forced into making.
I coined a term that I don't know if I've never read it, so I'm going to try and patent it. I said, someone asked me, like, well, does this mean that the taxpayer actually doesn't, have to pay? And I was like, well, no, it means burr or borrow. So like brr or borrow. That's really what the Fed is actually saying to you, and who's ultimately, responsible for that. It's going to be the taxpayer. always.
Yeah, of course. Obviously. That's literally all they have is us. They're tax cattle.
Yep.
All right, what do we got here? Can you both name your favorite Limp Bizkit songs? Oh yeah, we could go hard on this. Thanks for the stream. I'll keep simping for Clint on Twitter while looking forward to seeing Dave and Robbie in Tampa. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to Tampa as well. Yeah, Clint, you're only 6 hours away from Tampa. How far is it from
What
where
day?
you
What
are?
day are you there?
I'm there in May. I think shit. I'll check for sure and let you know.
Okay. Well, I'm now doing a lot of events myself, so if I'm free, I'll come up. I don't care.
Hell yeah, dude. I'm
I don't
in
got kids.
Tampa on May 19th and the 20th. So Side Splitters Comedy Club.
Hell yeah. Let me check out my paper calendar. May 19th and 20th. All right. I mean, there's BTC Miami, which they wanted me to speak at, but I don't have to do that. So I'll see you there, man.
All right. Hell yeah. There we go. All right. What do we got? What do we got next? All right. Daniel Smith says, any chance you guys can get Scott Horton on Rogan? That would be epic. I'll be honest, the idea has never crossed my mind. So now thank you for suggesting it, and I'll think about that. Whew, that would be cool, I guess.
I'll tweet it at Rogan. Let him know.
Appreciate the nuance, Clint. Dave, don't spend this all in one place. We will try our best not to. Germ theory is fake. Dave ask Owen. Oh, fucking my brother Owen Benjamin. He might. Yeah, no, I think he's wrong on that one, but I love him to death. Israel could be next. Yeah, dude, I'll tell you, Israel's going through a whole thing right there too, where they had this major like judicial shakeup, and they've like gone to this crazy new like authoritarian model. A lot of really crazy shit going on there that also coincides, or not, but the timing is lining up with this thing between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But I will certainly tell you that Iran and Saudi Arabia making a deal is not what the Israeli government wants to see.
Hell no.
That's been the polar opposite of their objectives for a long time, is to kind of like divide these other Muslim countries and keep as many of them in their pocket as they can. But so we'll see.
Yeah, if Iran gets too froggy, you could see the Israelis go after them too. So who knows, man?
Yeah, hell yeah. All right. Hey Dave, can't wait to see that sweet new part of the problem sign behind you. Clint should let me make one for him. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, dude, I got this new fucking that by next month I'll be in my new studio, assuming that we have a next month. But if the internet is on and we haven't got a nuclear war, next month I got a studio here that I built, and this guy made this dope fucking like wood art part of the problem
that's
sign
killer
for me. Yeah, it's at the Gas Digital studio right now, and I have to go get it over to my house to hang it up in the studio.
DM me, man, at Liberty Lockpod. Let's set this up. I need one.
Yeah, he makes real cool like wood art.
That's awesome.
Clint, first Silvergate, then SVB, USDC on pegging. Now regulators just decided to go into Signature Bank, another crypto-related bank. Is this just the beginning of Operation Choke Point?
I think that there's a lot of people in the crypto world that think that this is a play from the feds to undermine the crypto, decentralized currency world. I don't have any evidence of it, man, but like, if you had a monopoly on the creation of currency and you were able to take out some competitors that actually, had some more sound aspects to their currency, would you do it? Yeah, I would. So,
yeah, who knows? Yeah, it's really hard to say. Really, really hard to say. It's like you put it that way. Would you do it if you could do it? You probably would. So who's to say that they're not? All right,
man.
Let's have you looked at the unrealized losses in the derivatives market and what some of the major banks are holding? Yikes.
I don't know how you would even look that up, to be honest. Like,
yeah, I don't know.
If he can send me that, I'd be happy to look at it. But the derivatives have been a very kind of, I don't know, unclear market for a very long time. And you were talking about how just the US unfunded liabilities might be in the hundreds of trillions. Well, if you add in all of the global world and all of their debt, which is already hundreds of trillions, not including unfunded liabilities, and then you add in the derivatives markets, which is another hundreds and hundreds of trillions of dollars. I mean, it's just unsustainable. I mean, this is why I'm so convinced.
It's really so unbelievable to just think that like okay, like I know this is a long time ago, but say like around like the 1870s, you have like the Industrial Revolution, and like okay, the 1870s are what they're okay 150 years ago or something like that, 160 years ago. Okay, but that's really like it's two people ago.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's not that long ago. And that's when like wealth is actually created by any modern standard of the world. And then you fast forward to this point and you're like, we have wealth that you would have been just magic fantasy in a time like that, what we have today. And then you go, oh, and also somehow from creating all of this wealth, we created all of this like leverage worth more wealth than has ever been created in human history, or you know what I mean? We could possibly fathom creating. Is really just so goddamn bizarre.
And then,
yes,
people say it's no big deal because there's counterparty risk. I'm like, okay, but like if it goes one direction, that means that one side has to pay the other side those sums. Do you think that kind of money exists? Because I don't. So
it absolutely doesn't. And there's the odds are it goes one side or the other. Like that's kind of almost how
that's
it
the
has
whole
to go.
reason that they're making those bets in the first place.
Right. Yeah, that's the whole point of a bet. One side wins. Okay. Okay. Hyperinflation no time soon. The U.S. dollar milkshake theory. Rush to dollar. We export inflation and crush the world. That's why BRICS is fed up and wants to end the USD reserve currency.
He's right, but he's wrong, because the petrodollar system, the reason that we've been the reserve currency and the reason that the dollar milkshake theory functions is because we are the reserve currency. If that changes, which they are attempting to change it, then the dollar milkshake theory is poof, gone. So like, yes, that has been my functioning thesis for a while now, but I'm not so certain that's what we actually end up seeing.
I think people underestimate how much of a strategic misstep this the support for Ukraine in this war is, the way our government's been going at it, because the message that we send here is not that like this is a new step in the American empire. Russia has basically accepted the American empire. Think about it. They've accepted NATO expanding all the way to their borders, right? They've accepted losing like the Baltic states. They've accepted losing like, forget Poland or something like that. They've accepted like they had a red line that was Ukraine and Georgia.
Right.
That was their red line, right? And like that you have so when you go to that extent that you're like, no, we'll fight, okay, we're not fighting, but we'll really go, like, we'll make the number one priority taking Ukraine. Well, what does that say to China about Taiwan? What does that say to that they go, oh, they will stop at nothing. And at the same time, they're watching us being, 30 trillion in debt, hundreds of trillions in debt total. They're watching our culture be completely degraded. They're watching us having been locked down over the last few years. They're watching all of this. And I think it's almost like this moment where they're going like, dude, they're asking for too much and they can't back this up. That we've almost pushed everybody to go to like, this is the it's almost like in a weird way, I could, it's like if I had you locked in my basement and you're unarmed and I have guns drawn on you. And I'm like, look, you're staying in my basement. You can't leave. And here's your food for the day. And then maybe at a certain point, I go, I'm not giving you food anymore. Bingo. And you might go, I'm going to rush this dude, even though he's got a gun and I don't have a gun. Like you might actually be pushed to that point where you go, well, I'm going to die either way. And I'm ready to, and then throw into that I like have a really bad cold and I'm weak and I'm like not at my, you know what I mean? Like it might, I'm not saying it is, but it might be at the perfect storm where this is their moment where they go, and look, they go, hey, we got Russia, we got China, we got Iran, Saudi Arabia's talking to us. We got a lot of powerful countries here who are like, this might be the moment. And so that's the question here. I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm just saying like there's a real question here where there might be a shakeup, Yeah, man. There might.
And I think, I mean, perfect example of what you're describing is like we kick Russia off of SWIFT right away and we sanction them and we steal hundreds of billions of their capital. And now we're threatening to not just seize it, but actually take it and give it to the Ukrainians to rebuild their country. I mean, it's just like, whether you think that's moral or not, like maybe Russia is responsible for rebuilding Ukraine in a moral world. But the reality is like they have 5,000 nuclear weapons. and you're trying to take away their warm water port, like, and they're just saying to themselves, like, and not on top of that, you also want it to be basically a member of NATO. So they're just like, they're locked in, like forevermore. They're going to have to be on a massively defensive footing with their direct neighbors, all of them.
Well, like, I mean, look, essentially, and I think this is what led to the war to begin with, but essentially Ukraine is a de facto member of NATO.
Oh yes, it is.
I think that's
clearly
what Vladimir Putin realized and went, oh, they did it. I mean, they didn't announce that they did it, but they did it. And like, by the way, Article 5, if you actually look through it, it doesn't insist that we actually go to war. It insists that we have to, if one of them are attacked, we have to support them in their war effort.
So that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Look at what we're doing.
That's crazy.
And the truth is, and I just think this is the obvious reality. It is a fairy tale that Ukraine retakes Crimea. Nukes go off before that. That's not happening. And the idea that people are even like pretending, and then I saw Victoria Nuland a couple weeks ago said, well, we're not even saying you have to, like, Ukraine has to retake Crimea, but it has to be demilitarized. And you're like, that's the same thing, dude.
It's not going to happen either, bitch.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing as Russia losing it is just saying they can't have their naval base there. Like, okay, so just saying that's not going to happen. They will die on that hill. Are you ready to die on that hill? And by die on that hill, I mean die. I mean, are you ready to die on that? Like, okay,
my answer is
not.
No.
Then stop talking about it, because that's what you need to do.
Yeah, but what do we got? Just to make the point real quick, like, we kicked them off SWIFT. We forced them into the arms of the Chinese. Now the Chinese are a major player economically. They're responsible for, exporting so much of the goods that we get. Not to mention they have, Taiwan, which provides most of the chips that go into our technology. And China's like, okay, well, now you're going to turn around and blame us for the release of COVID. So we're like, everything we're doing is going to be dedicated towards breaking your unipolar world, because you have decided that we are your arch enemy, even though we haven't behaved as such. And I think that's what Putin's saying to himself. That's not to excuse his behavior. It's explaining his rationale. Like, of course, if I was Putin, I'd be like, these people have lied about me for years and years. They said that the sitting president of the United States was there because of my interference, and it didn't happen. Like, clearly they're setting groundwork for the American people to hate me, to justify a war against me. And he was fucking right. So I just wish people would stop pretending that's not the case. Like, this is all a product of our consistent intervention 6,000 miles away. Why do we continue to do this? It's madness.
Yeah, especially with all the stuff that we've been talking about this whole stream. Like, I mean, Jesus Christ, like, we have enough problems.
We have so many problems.
Yeah, it really is just something too that, like, people can't just see that you're like, it's not, again, it would be one thing I could kind of understand if it was Ron Paul and Harry Brown, and like libertarian kooks or whatever. It was Tom Woods and Scott Horton who had said this would be provocative to Russia to expand NATO all the way to their doorstep.
It wasn't them.
It was them.
Oh, of course.
It was also, it was all of the, like, senior establishment of the whole national security apparatus. Like, I could give you, like, secretaries of defense like Robert Gates and Robert McNamara, and like Bill Clinton's secretary of defense.
They all
all these people who all objected. I mean, so many of them, Cold Warrior hawks, so many of them all objected to this, and objected to this not on the grounds that oh my God, we would be, well, why should we be subsidizing the defense of Europe when really they can pay their own way? It's not like any of that. It wasn't like George Kennan and all these people. None of them were saying that. None of them were saying, oh, this is kind of like a crony corrupt scheme. The reason they said not to do this is that it will provoke Russia. Not that it's a boondoggle, that this will be a provocation to Russia if we do this. And then they do it. And then even after they overthrow the government in 2014 and they have a coup against the democratically elected government in Ukraine, and then Trump sends in all these weapons, they go, don't worry, this is deterrence. This is to deter Russia from invading Ukraine. Even though, like, I've talked about more than anyone else, Gideon Rose was talking back then, well, Russia could overthrow the chessboard. They could invade, even though the head of the CIA, Burns, Told you, Condoleezza Rice, in a private memo that fucking Julian Assange got all of us, that, oh, this could result in Russia, having military action in Ukraine. And then when Russia invades Ukraine, they go,
where the fuck did this come from?
Unprovoked. Who could have seen this coming?
It's so crazy,
and then
man.
if you say it's provoked, they go, well, dude, what do you support Putin?
Exactly.
What do you
you love Russia?
It's just so insane. All right. Another chat. Oh, I missed that one. Sorry. I have enjoyed many of your recent podcasts. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know if that was to me or Clint, but they're both great. Dave, are you saying you control the weather, but not the banks? Let's just say we all control that weather. All right, what else we got? Whether they kick the can again or don't, eventually we end up accepting slavery in perpetuity, or we fight. The only currency that has ever purchased liberty is blood. The question is whether we'll pay when the bill comes due. Well, that seems like something that could get you kicked off YouTube. Okay.
And it's just not true either.
I don't
you
agree
can get
with
liberty
that.
without blood. You can.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. And I will tell you that this is my ultimate white pill. My case for the white pill is that I'd say, and I've said this many times over the last few years ago, look, after September 11th, 2001, obviously everyone knows this, especially if you look like the Project for a New American Century and stuff like that. They wanted to invade Iraq. And when those planes hit, they were like, we're invading Iraq. The decision was made. We've got the pretense. That's it. Yep. But why didn't they invade Iraq in late September 2001 or in late 2001? Why did they invade Iraq in 2002? They invaded Iraq in 2003 because they spent a full year plus laying down the propaganda. Oh, he's got weapons of mass destruction. He's in bed with Al-Qaeda. Him in Iran and North Korea, or the axis of evil. All this just nonsense, bold-faced lies. But they drummed up enough fear and enough belief that the American people were like, okay, we're for this. If they got nuclear weapons, we got to go take them out. Fine. Right. But the reason they did that is because they know they couldn't just go invade Iraq. They have to convince you first. And look at the massive propaganda campaign that they've put out over, the lockdowns or the vaccines or like any of this stuff. How many lies they've had to tell. Why are they lying to you constantly? They're lying to you because actually they need you to believe it, because they know you can actually stop them. And there's been examples of this. I like SOPA, when they tried to regulate the internet. Let me tell you, if SOPA had passed, this isn't happening right now. Literally, this is not happening right now. And it didn't pass because people just like rejected it. Now, also, there were some, like, I don't want to downplay this either. Like, for my elite theory right wingers out there were some elites who got behind that too. That's important also. I'm not trying to downplay that. But that's, look, and the other example is when Obama announced that we were having an Iraq-style war in Syria, that we were invading and overthrowing Assad. And there was just this massive campaign. Back then, the tech censorship hadn't taken over as much. And there was this massive campaign of people in full military uniform blocking out their face because they're not allowed to do that, saying, I will not fight for Al-Qaeda in Syria. And that got shut down. Now, they still had their covert war. They still funded, the al-Nusra and ISIS and all that. But it's just saying the people actually have way more power than you realize by just being like, we're not doing this, and being serious about it. Doesn't necessarily have to come to violence. It could just be people waking up. So there is a case for optimism. Okay, we can do a couple more super chats, and then I do have to wrap this up. Okay, let's go to the next one. Clint, what would you recommend to someone who has cash in the bank but wants to move it to a local credit union? Any advice on that? Smart move?
Oh, man. I'm going to say something that hurts my heart, but like, you'd be better off putting your money in JP Morgan Chase. Like, if you want it to be secure, like, there's nothing more secure than the government's preferred bank. I mean, Jamie Dimon is on speed dial whenever there's a fucking catastrophe. So like, just being straight with you guys, if you want to not, fund your enemies, if you're one of those types of folks, I would look at the credit unions. I certainly wouldn't look at any banks that are, ESG practitioners or pushers like, Silicon Valley Bank. Don't do those.
Yeah, that's I want to disagree with you, but if we're talking about if what your question is in the short run, this is what's gonna happen. You know,
It's the
it's like
most secure. Just being honest.
that movie that was actually, I think you'd probably agree with me if you saw it, but what was it, the Big Short? What was the one with Steve Carell where they did the movie about the
Big Short.
financial class, which was actually better than you would have thought it would be? You know
It was
what I
really
mean?
good.
Like it wasn't. It was like they actually did a more fair job than you would have thought. And there's that part at the end of it where Steve Carell's like, "We got him," you know. Now they're all exposed. Now they're all gonna pay, and then they're like, they're getting bailed out. And that's so. Just know, if you're talking about the short run, like if you think that, like, you know, look, man, this our Treasury Department, and again, like I said before, whether it's the banks have been nationalized or the nation has been bankalized, like there's Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, and our Treasury Department are indistinguishable.
They
are
really
all
are, man.
the same. They are all the same entity, and the Federal Reserve as well. So that's, you know, that, just know that going in, if you're just talking about what plans are best for you in the short term.
Yep. And if you just want to ride on principle, then yeah, find a local credit union and just make sure that they have proper underwriting.
Yeah. Okay. What do we got? We got a couple more here. Fed pivot before S&P hits negative 50%.
Yes.
Yeah. Way before that. Way before that. Way before. I'd say 10%. You might see a Fed pivot.
Oh no, it's already down that much. I think if you mean from now, then definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe 10% is a little bit of an exaggeration, but you see another 25% go down, I think there's a Fed pivot. That's my guess.
Yep.
I didn't see that last one. Wait, hold on. What was the last one? Because I was curious about that. Sopa Pipa is what originally introduced me to libertarianism.
Very
Interesting.
cool.
Those were the two bills that were designed to regulate the internet. And it was going to be like, really, go look into it, hardcore regulate the internet. Like websites could be shut off if the federal government disagreed with what was going, or deemed them, you know, threats to national security. That you would have, like, if
we would have all been Alex Jones.
Yes. Like it's hard to overstate. Like Joe Rogan wouldn't exist. He never would have become what he did. Like they had a plan in place to shut all of this down. And that was that, like, this happening this way was not part of that plan. And that's a really important thing to remember, that like even these guys, like they have plans. That doesn't mean they're inevitable. They can be shut down. And
that was a really important one to shoot down.
Yes. And obviously, as you can see, obviously even this just being allowed is not part of the plan. Like it's not.
They don't want you to be hearing us right now, I can assure you.
Yeah. All right. So what do we? Okay. Another comment. I worked managing Swift net nodes at DTCC. Clearing of stocks, bonds, and derivatives are in the quadrillion dollar a year range.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a lot of trillions.
Yeah.
That's 1,000 trillions.
It sure is. It's a lot of money. Okay. All right. Listen, Clint, thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me today. I really appreciate it. I think your insight was really valuable, and I hope everybody here enjoyed it and benefited from it. We'll see what happens over the next few days, man. It's going to get
tuned.
wacky.
Yeah, I'll do an update in midweek over on Liberty Lockdown if people want to check that out. And let me just also add, I will be at the Washington State LP March 24th through the 25th, Colorado. 29th, I'll do Liberty on the Rocks, and then 31st and the 1st of April, I will be speaking at the Colorado LP convention, and then I'm doing Tennessee, California. I'm actually debating Destiny on the war in Ukraine live in Nashville, Tennessee. So that's going to be
awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be huge, man. So that
is part of the Decentralized Revolution tour.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Hell yeah, dude. Yeah, that whole tour. I'm doing the date in New York on April 1st. But dude, that's going to be awesome. But decentralizedrevolution.com, I believe, is the website. But if not,
I don't know.
takehumanaction.com. That'll definitely get you.
Yeah, you'll find
direction. I'm doing an episode with Michael Heiss, I think, in the next week or something.
So perfect.
Talking
they'll hear all about it then.
Yeah. But that's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of great stuff coming up. There you go.
I got one more big addition.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
I just got added to Austin as well. And then last but not least, I got to mention this because your audience will find it crazy to believe, but I've been in talks with Tim Pool about starting a poker show, Poker with the Boys, with me as the host. I would actually end up moving to Virginia and doing it every Friday night with whoever his guests were, probably Thursday and Friday, maybe flying some other people, maybe get you on there one of these days. And like, I just want people to like think for a second how crazy that would be. I went from literally no one knows who I am to like maybe getting to bluff Jordan Peterson out of a hand of poker. Like, come the fuck on, man.
And
That'd
I
be
feel
so
like
cool.
you could.
Oh.
Like, it was as you bluff, like Jordan Peterson would be like, "But you don't understand. What you're playing is the archetype of the alpha male. And sure, you probably have some good hands, and oh, I'm gonna fold. It's like, yeah, no, I don't think so. Yeah,
I love your
amazing.
Jordan Peterson. That's
Dude,
very fun.
I will. I'll be there for if you do this. I'll make it work. I'll come down for the first episode of
Oh
that.
fuck
just
yeah,
to
dude.
with you and hang out. That's so.
Well, that might get the deal done because I know Tim Pool loves you. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm trying to set up a date to go up on there real soon. I've just been very busy, but I love those guys. I think that's such a cool idea too. I just think it's great. I love it,
man.
All right,
and that would mean I'd be on IRL like probably multiple times per week. So it could be a life-changing
really
thing. We'll
get
see.
Right, and really get our ideas out there. You know what
Big
I mean?
time, dude.
You look, Clint, dude. There's a lot of people in this movement who I've like kind of like noticed and started like, you know, like being like, oh, this is someone you got to listen to, and they've been mostly disappointments. But you, no, I'm kidding. But you, like, you really got a lot of important shit to say, dude. So I hope your voice gets out there to as many people as possible.
Well, thank you, man.
Okay,
Means a
thanks
lot.
again for joining us. Thank you everybody for watching. And yeah,
subscribe to Tower Gang.
Hell yeah, subscribe to Tower Gang. That's what we're really trying to say. You really want to protect your wealth, you need to subscribe to Tower Gang.
You will learn nothing over there. Definitely subscribe.
Liberty Lockdown. Go check out Clint Russell's stuff. And okay, talk to you guys soon. Have a good one, everyone. Peace.
Love you guys. Peace.